Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on earth. As always, I'm your host, Chris Kent, the Game Master, and this is part two of a story that is basically Brainiac versus the Flash, right? If you haven't seen part one yet, which is where Corey Burton played Brainiac, put a link below so that you can check that out first. Otherwise, this one might not make a whole lot of sense. Um, but yeah, so we played the Corey Burton half of it. Um, back I want to say around 2008, something like that. And then um I found out that John Wesley Shipp was coming to a town called Salem, Ohio, which is not too awful far away from where I live. It's like a 45-minute drive maybe. But at any rate, I was very excited about that because I was a huge fan of the 1990 Flash TV series where he played Barry Allen. And then in the what was at the time the current CW show, he was playing Jay Garrick, who's the Golden Age Flash. Um, and he's also played um, Professor Zoom, the Reverse Flash, in a variety of cartoons and video games and stuff like that. So, like, really, nobody, to the best of my knowledge, has played as many different Flash-related characters as John Wesley Shipp, right? And so in the time leading up to the convention, I started thinking of that old Brainiac game that we were never able to solve. And I thought, you know what? The Flash is so fast. He could kind of get around that. He could fix it. And so we went to this convention. And by the time we got there, which I'm married, I've got a couple kids. Um, my kids can be kind of a handful sometimes if it involves everybody piling in the car for a road trip, then like if I think we should leave by 8 a.m. or something, invariably we will leave at like 10 or 11 a.m. It's like herding cats at any rate. So by the time we get to the convention, it's like 12:30 and the line has died down. Kind of everybody who wanted to meet him already met him for the most part. And there were only maybe, I don't know, half a dozen people in front of us in line to meet him. And by the way, the previous Christmas, I had broken my leg and there were complications where it just wouldn't heal. To make a long story short, I don't eat any kind of dairy products at all. And without calcium, your bones don't heal, right? So it took us entirely too long to put two and two together there. But so the point is, on this particular day, I was actually in a wheelchair. And so a couple people showed up late to meet him, and I let them go in front of me in the line. And my thinking on that was I wanted him to play a game, right? And that um I didn't want the people behind me to be mad. So therefore I didn't want there to be anybody behind me. So he noticed me in the line partially because um I was in a wheelchair, partially because everybody else was wearing like Flash t-shirts and stuff and I was wearing a tie. And he noticed me letting people in front of him. And so he had been standing up here where this picture was taken, which was kind of off to the right side of the room. By the way, this convention was held in an old school that had been closed down. And something that made that day suck really bad was the school had been sealed up for like years. So all summer long, it had just gotten so hot in there. And this was a school that I'm guessing was probably built in like the 1940s or something like that and had weird windows. So when it came time to have the convention, nobody could figure out how to crack a window. Nobody had like aired out the school in advance or ran an air conditioner in advance or like none of that, right? So it was super hot. And at any rate though, um so everybody else is wearing like shorts and a t-shirt and they still are miserable. and I was wearing a white dress shirt, a red tie, and a pair of dress pants. And so he notices me in the line and he sees me letting people in front of me and stuff like that. And so when it's finally my time to kind of wheel up there, instead of standing up, he went over to the side and he goes, "Let's come over here." And there was a table and he sat down at the table because he wanted us to be on the same level. And I thought that was really kind of cool of him, right? Which I don't know if I said this already. He is literally the nicest human being I've ever met, ever. Not just actors or something, but I mean anybody ever, right? He's actually nicer than my uncles and stuff are. So, so at any rate, like I was so nervous meeting him. And this happens sometimes when I meet a celebrity. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know what it is. Because I got that way when I met John Byrne. But like I wasn't that way when I met Adam West, for instance. So I don't know what the thing is, but I suddenly just froze up and was like so scared I was like shaking, you know? And I told him that. And he said, "That's okay because that's going to be over in 3, 2, 1." And like that worked. It was weird, but that worked. And I guess that was some showbiz trick for kind of like stage jitters or something. I don't know. But so I kind of took a breath and I said, "Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I'm Chris Kent. I run the longest running superhero role-playing game on earth, yada yada yada." And I show him the box set for first edition DC Heroes, partially because it has a picture of the Flash on it, right? And and I get out the GM screen and which by the way is in the picture here. He signed it. Unfortunately, Zoom, which is what I use to record these videos, makes things really grainy. So I don't know how well you can see his signature, but that's it there on the moon. But at any rate, so I explained the whole thing, right? And I told him that Corey Burton had played the game and that he was Brainiac. And I thought it was cool. John Wesley Shipp knew who Brainiac was, so he's versed on DC Comics, which I thought that was pretty neat. Um, and I was like, so here's the deal: is he basically pulled a Skynet, he took over, and all the heroes in our game are stuck in their houses because if they leave, Brainiac's going to take out of town somewhere. And he thought this was like really interesting. He was very engaged and really, really focused on everything I was saying. And I was like, so you're the Flash? And he's like, I am. And like he said it in this weird way that was like so confident that like it kind of gave me a chill in a way. It was cool. But he's like, I am. And I was like, okay, so this is what Brainiac has done. You are so fast. You can move at the speed of light. Whatever signal he does, that doesn't happen at the speed of light. That happens at the speed of electronics. That's different speeds, right? And he's like, right. And I was like, so what do you do? And using layman's terms, he actually explains an idea that is very DC Heroes. The the game mechanic that we ended up going with is this idea that you would pick a thing like, for instance, how long does it take me to read a book, right? And the GM would tell you in terms of APs that let's say it would take you, I don't know, 10 APs is an hour, so that's not enough. Let's say 15 APs a time is how much it would take you to read this book, right? And and so the player would then say, okay, well, I have 10 APs of super speed. I want to reduce that 15 APs a time it takes to read the book by 10 APs. So in other words, I want to read it at super speed so that it only takes me 5 APs a time to finish it, which is just a matter of minutes instead of hours, right? So likewise, he explains the same concept. that he wants to reduce the amount of time it would take to research Brainiac and figure out how to disrupt the signal that he's using to shut all that stuff down. Because as soon as that's shut down, the rest of the heroes can come in and save the day. And I reach in my pocket and I pull out, I have two 10-sided dice. One is red, one is yellow, in honor of the Flash's costume, of course. And we give it to him and we're like, roll. And he rolled it. And we have a photograph of that somewhere. Maybe I should have used that for my art this week. I don't know. I guess I never use pictures of myself for anything. Um, but I used this picture to just kind of prove that we'd met. At any rate, but yeah, so he rolls the dice and he gets like a good roll. He rolls like a 17 or an 18 or something on 2d10. And we were like, that's great. It works. The whole thing works. And then we went over here to get our picture taken together. And so I got out of the wheelchair and I'm hobbling around. I got the cast on my leg. He was kind of helping me. He was giving me like a shoulder to lean on and stuff like that. Um, just such a nice guy. And then when we were standing there, I said, "Oh, hey, by the way, there's something I've always wondered about." And he's like, "What's that?" And I was like, "So there's this episode of the show where you had an evil twin." And he's like, "Good memory." And I was like, and his name was Pollux. And he had a blue suit instead of a red suit. And he's like, "Yeah," because he played both parts. Um, and I said, "But so you desperately seemed to need more red suits on the show." And he laughed. And I said, "Because um they would really make you run and you'd sweat in the suit." The suit was like rubber and it didn't breathe at all, as I understand it. And so he would sweat and the suit would just be full of sweat after a day of filming. And then they would he when he came back the next day, like you couldn't wash the suit. You know what I mean? It would destroy the suit if you threw it in a washing machine. So he had to put on this like cold, sweaty suit every morning and do it all over again, right? So I was like, so my question is, they were willing to make a blue suit, but not give you an extra red suit? Like they couldn't have just done something else, like flipped the film left to right or something, and had the flash symbol going the other way and have that represent the evil twin? Or I'm like, I just feel bad for you that you didn't have another suit. And he was like, it's actually the same suit. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, it's covered in powder. And somehow he was explaining to me that they used an electric charge, that the suit was somehow electrified, and that there was this red powder that would then stick to the suit normally. But so they did something to rid the suit of its charge, and all that red powder came off. And then they used blue powder, and then they filmed those scenes. And then they kind of green screened it together. So that's how he was playing both roles and fighting and all that. But I thought that was very interesting. Um, and then he was kind of like, "Well, I got to go get lunch. But are you gonna hang out today?" And I was like, "I don't know, man. Like I just came to meet you and roll some dice and we did what we set out to do. I don't know. The rest of my day is wide open." He's like, "Man, stick around." He's like, "Hang out." He's like, "I'm gonna be in the auditorium at 3 o'clock and I will see you there." And I was like, "That sounds cool. I'll see you there." We got along just incredibly well. And then um so yeah, me and the family uh wandered off and there's a KFC or something right around the corner from the convention. We went there and just sat there and talked for a little while, talked about how nice he was. Um my son pointed out how weird it was that when James Porch ran stuff with the Flash and my character, and well, no, I guess it started with Greg Sheets. Greg Sheets came up with this idea way back when that the Flash would like be my character's best friend. And I remember at the time being like, why would you say that? Like, of all the characters, why the Flash? And Greg was like, I don't know, like, I just think it would be a good fit. I was like, okay. And then years later, and I don't know if I ever told anybody that, but then James Porch was running a couple of adventures, and he also ran it, where Barry Allen was like my character's best friend. And so then we go meet the guy who I think of as Barry Allen, and my son, who was extremely familiar with all of these games. um, he's on the autism spectrum, and one of his things is he's very, very detail oriented, right? He's got kind of like a Rain Man thing going on for the continuity of my game world. And so he was saying, he's like, it kind of blows my mind that like you and Barry are supposed to be tight, and then we meet Barry and you guys are like really, really getting along well. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of surreal, isn't it? And so at any rate, then we go to the thing at 3 o'clock, and it was a Q&A session in an auditorium, and most people went home. And I think it was because it was so dang hot, right? And so they had this chick there that was a cosplayer, and she looked exactly like Zatanna, the fishnets and the top hat and all that jazz. And so she was like the MC of this event. And so she was going around the audience with a microphone, and I was like the only one asking questions. So I asked him if the 1990 Flash show was supposed to be based on the 1989 Batman movie, because I thought they shared kind of a visual aesthetic, and he thought it kind of did. Um, and then I asked him if they'd ever planned a crossover back in the day, that I had sort of thought they were supposed to take place in the same universe, and that I had wondered if either they were somehow going to come up with an excuse to have not Michael Keaton in the suit, but maybe somebody else wearing the suit, make a cameo in the shadows in an episode of The Flash, or conversely, maybe they would have got him to play a police officer in one of the scenes in Batman Returns or something like that. It's kind of a wink to the audience kind of a moment. And he said that wasn't the case, that nobody was thinking about that kind of stuff back then. But he said that they had approached him about uh, being in the Flash movie, which of course Michael Keaton was in that movie. And so he had said there was still hope for at the time in 2022. He said there was hope for him and Keaton to do something yet. And unfortunately now it looks like that ship has sailed. But yeah, and then after the Q&A thing, he came off the stage. He was hanging out with me. He was like giving me back rubs, which um I'm sure he meant it in a completely cool way, right? I don't think I've ever had like another man rub my back. You know what I mean? So like on my end, I was kind of like, what are we doing? I don't I don't know how to put it. But I sort of like tensed up, like, what's going on? But I gave my wife this look like the Flash is giving me a back rub, honey. I don't know what to do in this situation. She just laughed. Um, but no, he was nothing but kind, just the nicest guy ever. We hung out for a while. After everything was said and done, he was just hanging out there in the auditorium, and he had an agent or somebody come over and said that uh he had to get going. They had to head out to the next state for the next convention or whatever the thing was. So yeah, that was it. Oh, I left another part out, which was I thought it was kind of cool. Was so the mayor of Salem came out on the stage at one point and gave him the key to the city and declared that that day is forevermore in that town going to be Flash Day. That they named a holiday after him or whatever. And like that was really weird. And then so then on the drive home, which is about like a 45-minute drive, that was something me and my son were talking about, was like there was this surreal moment And part of it was we kept going back to that moment where I was like, "So you're the Flash?" And he was just like so confidently like, "Yup." So like there's this kind of weird thing where sort of like the line between like fiction and nonfiction was a little blurred. You know what I mean? And like maybe you had to be there. Maybe you don't know what I mean. But I was like, people were calling him Flash. Like when they said it was going to be Flash Day, they're like, we're naming it after you, Flash, or whatever. And he wasn't correcting him and saying, my name's John. You know what I mean? He was just kind of going with it. And just the whole give somebody the key to the city thing, I've only ever seen that in comic books, and it felt like we were in a comic book or something. It was very surreal. It was a very weird day. And I remember coming home and Greg Sheets, who was a game master of this game before me, I had kind of indicated to him that this is what I was going to do. And I think he may have thought, yeah, right, or something like that. And and then I posted the pictures online on Facebook, and he is such a Flash fan. And he's like, "Oh my God." He's like, "The Flash played our game," you know? And that was kind of cool too, because some of the guys who used to be game masters, they've never come right out and said it, but I think in a way, the idea is that I've made some decisions in the game that they would not have made. And sometimes I think there's a little bit of friction there. And so they will refer to the game as my game, you know, a lot. And I also am guilty of saying my game when I really should be saying our game because there's a ton of people that are a part of this, right? But it was cool because Greg is like, "Wow, the Flash played our game," you know. That was kind of a cool moment. And then I was just sort of gushing and telling Greg everything that happened, all the stuff I told you about, and he was really geeking out over it. He was really super excited about it and everything. And yeah, but it was a great day. It was almost um like being on a high and then coming down from it, like having to go back to the dreardom of day-to-day life. That kind of sucked. Um, but that's beyond the scope of this video. I should wrap it up. I've been long-winded enough. I hope that you enjoyed hearing about this. Um, as always, if you want to support the channel, we would love it if you took a minute to do all the stuff, right? Hit like, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and leave us a comment because that helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. Um, I hope that you guys have a fantastic week, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.